They all think I'm broke. It's hilarious, really. My name is Aaron. I'm 38 years old. I live just off Cypress Avenue in a modest-looking rental that people love to underestimate, especially my family. Every month, like clockwork, Joel hosts dinner at the old Dalton Estate, the massive colonial-style place up in the foothills above Santa Barbara. Used to be our dad's, but now Joel acts like it's some sort of family temple, and he's the self-appointed high priest. These dinners are supposed to be family bonding, but they always turn into a bragging contest about who's made the most money that month. I park my 10-year-old Tacoma along the gravel driveway, already bracing for the passive-aggressive jabs. As I walk through the front entrance, I'm greeted with the usual. Joel in a cashmere pullover, holding court by the fireplace, and his wife, Jess, always dressed like she walked out of a Napa lifestyle catalog, sipping rosé with a perfect smile glued on. Hey, Joel calls out, giving me that tight, performative hug. Still driving that trusty taco, huh? I grin. She's got a couple 100,000 miles left in her. Jess leans in with a laugh that doesn't reach her eyes. How's life on Cypress? I heard that whole street's going to be bought up soon. You might get priced out. I nod and sip my coffee. We'll see. They always do this, mock me without even realizing what they're really saying. To them, I'm the harmless underachiever, the middle brother who never quite launched, a property manager, technically, but basically a renter in their eyes. Joel, puffed up with red wine and his own voice, launches into a story about his recent Aspen investment. So we've got this new lodge right off the slopes, fractional ownership, but I'm the majority holder. We're talking ski in, ski out, boutique, concierge, the works. Jess beams. And I just closed on this Spanish vineyard that was undervalued like crazy. We'll probably flip it in 2 years. I hum along, uninterested. Then Joel turns to me. What about you, little brother? Still managing that old place with the sagging awning? I smile faintly. Yep, still there. They laugh, not unkindly, but with the confidence of people who believe they've won the game before it even started. They don't know. They don't know that the Cypress building isn't just where I live. It's part of a portfolio I've slowly acquired over the past decade through a quiet LLC, West Haven Equity. They don't know that the reason they got their favorable refinancing terms last year was because I'm on the approval board. They don't know that 6 months ago, when Joel was late on a balloon payment and thought the estate was saved by some angel investor, that angel was me. I bought the house. I own it. The place we're sitting in, laughing in, eating Joel's dry brisket in, I hold the deed. It's tucked inside a trust, buried in paperwork so thick no one would ever bother to trace it back. They think I'm a joke, and I let them, because one day, very soon, the joke will be mine to tell. The plates were cleared, wine glasses refilled, and now came the part I dreaded most, the questions disguised as concern. Joel leaned back in his chair and turned toward me, hands laced behind his head like he was settling into his therapist's office. So, Aaron, what's next for you, man? You ever think about doing something real with your life? Jess tilted her head like a kindergarten teacher about to hand out a gold star. You're so good with people. You ever think about getting your realtor's license? Maybe move up from managing to owning something? I didn't bother correcting her. I stirred my black coffee, letting the silence hang just long enough to make it awkward. Joel filled the gap. I mean, I get it. That Cypress Avenue complex is probably all you can handle. But I heard some firms buying up that whole block. Might be time to find a new place, huh? Jess gave a sympathetic little wince. They're saying the whole thing's getting torn down. Shame. That area's got character. I looked over at them. Haven't heard anything official, but if it happens, I'll figure it out. That made them smile, not kindly. Joel clinked his glass against Jess's. To figuring it out. Here's what they didn't know. I am the firm. The LLC they're gossiping about? West Haven Equity. My firm. The name's been circulating in town quietly, disguised under holding companies and shellcore. I bought the building 3 months ago, and I'm not tearing it down. We're restoring it. New plumbing, better insulation, upgraded units that still honor the original bones. More importantly, I kept the rent protections. Every elderly tenant who's lived there for decades is staying. No displacement, no evictions. Just a better version of what they already had. I could have told them that, but they didn't ask. Instead, Joel leaned in with a faux whisper. You know, I've got a buddy who does demo and redevelopment. If you need help relocating, he can probably cut you a deal on something on the edge of town. Jess nodded along. We have that pool house too. I mean, it's tiny, but it's probably nicer than where you are now. And with the market being so nuts, we'd only charge like minimal rent, just utilities maybe. I smiled, because here they were, offering me a place to live, not knowing I own the place they're offering it from. The pool house? It's part of the estate parcel. The lease they signed? I restructured it myself. I've walked the perimeter of that house more times than they ever have, measuring for grading, checking stormwater drainage, assessing the retaining walls. I've been rebuilding the foundation under their lives while they sit at this table acting like I'm the family stray. Joel reached over and clapped me on the back. You'll land on your feet. You always do. I nodded slowly. Yeah, I usually do. They laughed like I'd confirmed my place at the bottom of the ladder. But the truth was, I was standing at the top, watching them climb a ladder I built, holding every rung in my pocket. Later in the evening, after Jess's third glass of wine and Joel's second retelling of how he rescued a failing lodge investment, Dad finally cleared his throat. The way he does when something important's coming. So, he said, setting his tumbler down, any of you heard about the Ashcroft Plaza mess? Joel's smile slipped just a little. Jess stiffened, eyes darting toward her glass. I stayed quiet, sipping my coffee, watching the show begin. Dad leaned forward, elbows on the table. The board's been in full panic mode. Apparently, there's a new majority investor. Came out of nowhere. Bought up shares one by one over the last year. No name, no face, just a series of legal filings and proxy reps. Yeah, Joel said quickly. I heard rumors. Could be a hedge fund guy, or maybe Saudi money. They love legacy properties like that. Jess chimed in, trying to sound breezy. Or one of those bored tech millionaires who wants to preserve history, throw their money around to look noble. Dad shook his head. Whoever it is, they're making moves. Big ones. Ordered a forensic audit last week. Every line item from the last 5 years is being reviewed. There was a pause, a thick one. Joel picked up his glass but didn't drink. Jess blinked twice, slowly. I watched the color drain from her face, just a little. Because they knew. They knew their hands had been in the honey jar for years. Padded maintenance invoices. Consulting fees paid to LLCs that don't even have websites. Vendor kickbacks run through shell companies in Jess's maiden name. All approved with smiles and handshakes. And now someone was turning the lights on. Joel tried to laugh it off. An audit? Sounds like overkill. Everyone's always had access to the books. Dad shrugged. Apparently, the new investor disagrees, wants a full clean slate before moving forward with renovations. Jess finally spoke, her voice a notch too high. Do we even know what their end game is? Like, why buy into a 50-year-old plaza with outdated zoning and a crumbling parking structure? I could have answered. Could have told them exactly why, because that plaza is a cornerstone, the kind of place you don't demolish, you restore. The kind of project that makes city councils smile and preservation societies throw your name around in articles, because owning it means controlling the future of half the town's main strip. And because that plaza now belongs to West Haven Equity, 62% ownership and counting, every share strategically purchased through layered acquisitions. I signed the audit order myself 3 nights ago. Clay, my assistant, already briefed the accounting firm. Everything's moving, and soon everything they've been hiding will surface. Joel finally exhaled, loud and annoyed. You ask me. This guy's just flexing. Probably wants to scare the board into selling the rest of the shares. Maybe, I said, setting my mug down. Or maybe he just wants to know where the money's been going. Jess flinched. It was subtle, but I saw it. Dad nodded, oblivious. Whatever the case, it's shaking things up. Half the board's already lawyering up. Joel scoffed. Well, whoever it is better be ready. Ashcroft isn't some pet project. It's our legacy. I smiled. Small, quiet, just for myself. Because that's the thing about legacy. Sometimes you don't inherit it. Sometimes you buy it out from under the people who never saw you coming. And then you audit the hell out of it. It was almost funny watching them switch tones. Dinner was winding down. Dad had gone to refill his drink, and the mood had shifted. The audit had rattled Joel and Jess more than they let on. I could see it in the way they avoided each other's eyes, in the stiff smiles they gave the rest of the table. Then Jess suddenly turned to me, all sugar and sympathy. "Hey, Aaron," she said, sliding into a voice so soft it almost sounded genuine. "Do you know anyone at West Haven? I mean, I know you manage some of their residential stuff, right?" Joel didn't even interrupt this time. He just looked at me, face blank, waiting. Even Dad, back with his drink, sat down slower, a little more careful, like he suddenly realized I might be worth paying attention to. I gave a little shrug, keeping it casual. "I mostly work small residential," I said. "Nothing like that scale." Jess forced a laugh. "Oh, come on. You must know someone. Maybe you could put in a word just to slow things down a little?" Joel finally spoke. "Just to keep things from getting out of hand." I let my eyes linger on him for a second too long. "What do you mean by out of hand?" He waved a hand. "You know how audits are. People start nitpicking every little thing, misread numbers, missing receipts. It turns into a witch hunt. We don't need that kind of noise right now." "Right," Jess added quickly. "If you know someone over there, maybe just tell them we're cooperative, that we've always been transparent." That word, transparent, almost made me laugh out loud. They still thought I was the intern, the assistant, the clipboard guy who might know someone behind the curtain. They had no idea I was the one holding the curtain open. I just nodded and took another sip of my coffee. "I'll see what I can do." Jess beamed. Joel relaxed a little, leaned back in his chair like a weight had lifted. Dad gave me an approving nod. For once, no sarcasm, no subtle digs about my truck or my shoes, just cautious hope. They still thought I was renting a beat-up unit on Cyprus, still thought I was scraping by, maybe lucky to be invited to these dinners at all. Now, all of a sudden, I had value, because they were scared. And they still didn't get it, didn't realize I wasn't some middleman who knew the guy running the audit. I was the guy. I signed the papers. I picked the forensic firm. I chose which line items to flag. I knew which shell companies Jess had used, which contractors Joel overbilled, which maintenance contracts were pure fiction. They needed me. And still, they didn't ask the right questions. Joel looked at me, almost sincere for once. "Just keep us in the loop, all right? Let us know if you hear anything." "I'll do my best," I said. Then Mom, who had been quiet most of the night, gave me a sad little smile. "I always hoped you'd find your way, Aaron. I just wish you had aimed higher." That stung. Not because it was new, I'd heard it all my life, but because she still couldn't see it. Even now, when I held the entire table in my hands, they were groveling, and still saw me as the underachiever. Let them. The truth was coming, not in a scream, not in a headline, in paperwork, in numbers, in names on spreadsheets they'd never expect. They thought I was the black sheep finally becoming useful. What they didn't realize, I was the shepherd. The morning air had that crisp coastal chill, enough to bite at your cheeks, but not enough to need a coat. I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the navy suit I hadn't worn in almost a year. Simple, clean, sharp enough to cut through the noise. Clay stood behind me in the doorway of my home office, holding a slim black folder. "Everything's prepped," he said. "Audit summary, board notifications, the press package. Once you give the green light, it all goes live." I nodded once, tightening my tie. "The identities? 15 minutes. Newswire release hits at 9 a.m. sharp. West Haven's founder and majority owner, full profile, photo, business history. Interviews are already lined up for next week. They're going to know your name by lunch." I looked at myself again. Not the worn-down property manager they saw at the dinner table. Not the guy in boots and rolled-up sleeves. This man wore legacy-like armor. Clay hovered for a second. "You sure you want to go through with this? There's no undoing it. They'll know everything. You'll burn every bridge." I didn't hesitate. "Let it burn," I said quietly. "They had their chance." He gave a short nod and set the folder down on my desk. "Then we're live in 15. I stood there a minute after he left, hands in my pockets, watching the digital clock tick down on my desktop. I thought about Cypress Avenue, the building I still lived in despite owning half the neighborhood. I thought about the old tenants, the late-night plumbing calls, the shop owner downstairs who gave me free coffee every Friday. I thought about Joel smirking across the table, about Jess's voice when she said I could live in the pool house just until things settle. And I smiled. The board still didn't know who had ordered the audit. They'd guessed hedge funds, foreign buyers, some trust fund baby trying to play legacy savior. That guess was about to expire. I reached for the folder Clay left and flipped through the top sheet. Page 1, detailed audit findings. Page 2, a summary of financial misconduct. Page 3, an executive summary prepared for the board, signed by me, Aaron Blake, Managing Partner, West Haven Equity Holdings. Sutter. The next page was blank, just a single line, typed in small font near the top. Legacy is earned, not inherited. I slid the folder back into its sleeve and zipped it into my briefcase. This wasn't just about revenge. This wasn't about evening the score. It was about reclaiming my name, not the one they used to mock, but the one I had built brick by brick, contract by contract. By the time I stepped outside, the sun had risen just enough to make the morning haze look golden. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I checked the screen. 9 a.m. Identity release, West Haven Equity founder Aaron Blake. The first text came 5 seconds later, then another. Then the phone started ringing. Joel, then Jess, then Mom. I let it ring. They weren't calling to laugh this time. They were calling because they finally realized the renter with the rusted Tacoma, he owned the estate, the plaza, and the story they thought was theirs. And I wasn't hiding anymore. The Ashcroft Plaza boardroom smelled like old carpet and espresso, mahogany table, worn leather chairs, and a long window that framed the downtown skyline like a painting. The board had been meeting in that room for decades, hashing out budgets, lease renewals, and maintenance upgrades, legacy decisions made by legacy people. Joel was already there when I walked in. He stood near the far end of the room, arms crossed, whispering something to a man in a gray blazer. As soon as he saw me, his whole posture changed. "This is a private meeting," he snapped, like a bouncer guarding the last rope line in town. I kept walking, my briefcase in one hand, the other in my coat pocket. Calm, quiet. I reached the head of the table and set the case down with a quiet click. Then I looked up and met his eyes. "It's not a private meeting," I said. "It's mine." Joel blinked. "What are you?" "I own the plaza," I said louder now for the room to hear. "I own West Haven, and this," I tapped the table once, "is the audit briefing." Jess was just walking in. She froze when she saw me. Her eyes went wide. "This is a joke," she whispered, like maybe saying it out loud would make it true. I opened the briefcase, pulled out a thick folder, and began passing out copies of the findings, one for each board member, one for the meeting secretary, one for Joel, one for Jess. Joel shoved his copy back across the table. "You're a property manager. You manage rundown buildings. You don't belong here." "No," I said, sliding it back to him. "I own portfolios, and you've been stealing from one of them." That got quiet, the kind of quiet where you can hear someone shift in their seat at the other end of the room. I opened my own copy and read the first line aloud. "Between April 2020 and October 2024, Ashcroft Plaza disbursed over $430,000 in consulting and maintenance fees to entities tied to current board members and their spouses." Jess reached for a folder with shaking hands. Joel stayed frozen. I flipped the page. "Invoices submitted to third-party LLCs, non-existent vendors, multiple reimbursements duplicated under different line items, funds transferred to personal accounts listed under maiden names." "Stop," Joel muttered, his voice low. "You have no idea what you're talking about." I looked up. "Then explain this." I held up a photocopy of a maintenance invoice, $18,000 for asphalt repair from a vendor that didn't exist. The routing number traced directly back to Jess's Wellness Consulting LLC. Jess turned ghost white. A woman near the middle of the table, one of the newer board members, spoke up. "Is this verified?" I nodded. "Multiple times. We have bank statements, IRS filings, and vendor verification letters. Everything's in the appendix." Another board member flipped through his copy, eyes narrowing. This is serious." Joel stood now, pacing. "This is insane. You went behind our backs." "No," I cut in. "I went through the front door. The shares I bought were all legal. Your votes helped approve most of them. You just didn't check the name on the paperwork." Jess shook her head, whispering to herself. "Dad wasn't there. He wouldn't show. Not when things got ugly." Joel stopped pacing and turned back to me, pointing. "You're doing this because of a grudge. You want to humiliate us." I leaned in slightly. "No. I'm doing this because people like you built your reputations on borrowed power. And the people you stepped on to get here?" One of them just pulled the rug. More silence. One by one, heads turned from Joel and Jess to me. The man they mocked. The man they ignored. Now the man with all the receipts, literal and otherwise. I'll give you all a week, I said, closing my folder, to review everything, to prepare your statements. This isn't a negotiation, it's a reckoning. And then I walked out, leaving behind the sound of paper shuffling, frantic whispers, and the long overdue sound of silence. They used to laugh at me. Now they had to explain me. I didn't expect Joel to back down. That wasn't his style. He followed me out of the boardroom, footsteps fast and uneven on the marble hallway. When I stopped to face him, he didn't even try to hide the fury in his voice. You'd throw your own family under the bus? After everything? I stayed quiet for a second, then looked him straight in the eye. I'm not throwing anyone. I'm showing you the wreckage. You drove it here. His jaw clenched. You don't get it. This is bigger than some audit. You're about to destroy our names, our lives. No, I said. You did that when you started treating trust like a resource to mine. Jess caught up to us, heels clicking like gunfire against the floor. She looked like she hadn't blinked since I started speaking back in the boardroom. Why didn't you say something? She asked, her voice tight. Why didn't you ever tell us who you were? Because I didn't need your approval, I said. Then my phone buzzed. Not a text. Not a call. Notifications. Dozens. Press alerts, news pings, email tags. I opened one of them. West Haven Equity founder revealed. Aaron Blake, the quiet developer who's changing preservation real estate clay, had timed it perfectly. Headlines from every outlet, local and national, were lighting up with my name, my projects, my face. Not just a name drop, but a profile. A picture of me in front of the Cypress Avenue building, tenants smiling behind me. The article described me as one of the top 5 ethical developers in the country. It talked about West Haven's track record of preserving affordable housing and protecting vulnerable renters. It said I wasn't just the man behind the audit. I was the man trying to fix what others had broken. Across the hall, a board member stepped out of the room, phone in hand. Aaron, he said, I just read this. You're the reason West Haven's ranking shot up this quarter? I nodded. He looked back down at the screen. I had no idea. Jess swayed slightly, and Joel's hands curled into fists at his sides. He wasn't angry anymore. He was unraveling. You lied to us, he muttered. No, I said. I let you talk. That's different. Just then, another board member stepped out and read aloud from their phone. Blake's approach blends community values with profit transparency, creating a rare blueprint for ethical ownership in urban redevelopment. I turned back to Jess and Joel. See, you were right about one thing. This isn't just about money. Jess's lips parted like she wanted to argue, but she couldn't. Not anymore. Joel looked hollow now, like someone had knocked the air out of him but left him standing. Behind me, someone laughed softly, not mocking, just amazed. That guy used to rent a place off Cypress, I heard someone say. Now he owns the plaza? I didn't correct them. I just let it hang there. They had spent years thinking I was the weak link in the family. The safe target for their little jokes. The one who'd never measure up. But now I wasn't the disappointment in the room. I was the consequence. The fallout came quick. Joel's Aspen deal collapsed within a week. Turns out the lender backing his ski lodge investment didn't appreciate his name being flagged in a forensic audit. They pulled out fast, real fast. Jess's husband's venture fund, the one quietly funneling kickbacks through shell LLCs, gone. Folded after one too many vendors pulled contracts. Word spreads fast when your name shows up in a scandal linked to financial mismanagement. Even Mom couldn't escape the splash. She resigned from 2 community boards, quietly, of course, but everyone knew why. Santa Barbara's social circles are small, and people talk. The woman who used to flash her pearls and talk about upholding family values suddenly couldn't hold eye contact at Whole Foods. But it wasn't all scorched earth. Some of them shifted. Jess, the same woman who used to smirk when asking if I needed a job referral, started volunteering at a local shelter downtown. I didn't ask why. Maybe she was trying to clean something inside herself. Maybe it was just court-ordered PR advice. Either way, she showed up, kept showing up, week after week. Joel, ever the control freak, enrolled in night classes, construction management of all things, said he wanted to understand what goes into building something real. The irony wasn't lost on me. I didn't mock him. I just nodded when he told me. Let the silence do the work. And Dad, he came around, slowly, I found him waiting outside my Cypress building one evening, holding a box of pastries from the old Italian place near State Street. No lecture, no backhanded compliments, just, "Can we talk?" We sat in the courtyard under the cafe lights I'd strung up last Christmas. He looked around at the building like he'd never really seen it before. "I thought you'd end up like your uncle," he said finally. "Smart, but never built anything." I didn't answer. He cleared his throat. I was wrong. I let the silence stretch. He needed it. Then he said something I never expected. "Would you teach me?" I raised an eyebrow. "Teach you what?" "How you did it, not the money part, the rest of it, the long game." I stared at him a moment. My father, who had always acted like I was chasing scraps while Joel chased real success, now looking at me like I had a map, and he was finally willing to follow it. I nodded once. "Start with this. Never spend more than 5 minutes impressing someone who doesn't listen for 6. He actually laughed. Fair enough. That was how it started. Not a full apology, not some tearful reconciliation. Just 2 men sitting in a courtyard talking about foundations, the ones made of concrete and the ones made of silence. And even with all the fallout, even with the names burned and the bridges charred, something surprising began to happen. They started listening. Not to bragging rights or investment pitches, to tenants, to tradesmen, to the guy who used to fix leaking pipes in the middle of the night because no one else would. They mocked my empire when they thought it was made of duct tape and rent checks, but now they saw the truth. It wasn't flashy, it was fireproof. 6 months later, I was still living on Cypress Avenue, still driving the same Tacoma, still walking the building every morning with a cup of black coffee and a notepad in my back pocket. The difference? People knew who I was now, but I hadn't changed a thing. The building was beautiful now. Fresh paint, upgraded fixtures, new roof. The courtyard had become the heart of it. Twinkling string lights overhead, mismatched patio furniture that somehow fit together just right. Kids played in the dusk while old tenants swapped stories over checkers and iced tea. The building felt alive again. I decided to throw a small holiday party. Nothing fancy. Just food from local shops, music from someone's Bluetooth speaker, and enough cider to keep people warm in the Santa Barbara winter. Tenants showed up first. The Gonzalez family from 2B, Mr. Rayner from the ground unit, Miss Eldridge, who'd lived there since the late 70s. Then a few shop owners from down the block came by, dropping off desserts and asking if they could stay. "Of course," I told them. "This isn't gated." And then some families started showing up. Joel walked in awkwardly, holding a tray of homemade cookies that looked like they'd survived a car crash. "Don't laugh," he warned, handing them over. I followed a recipe this time. I didn't laugh, I just nodded and pointed toward the table. "Stick them next to the cannoli." Jess came a little later, helping the neighborhood kids frost more sugar cookies than anyone would reasonably eat. She didn't say much to me, just smiled, nodded, kept working with the kids. Then, just as I was setting out the last stack of paper plates, Mom walked in. No pearls, no makeup, just jeans, a puffer vest, and 2 store-bought pies. She looked around, a little unsure. "Is this okay?" she asked, holding up the pies. I wasn't sure what people liked. I took them gently and set them down. "You came," I said. "I wasn't sure I should," she admitted. "But I've been reading about your work. I didn't understand before." I didn't say anything, just waited. She looked around the courtyard, at the lights, the laughter, the people whose names she didn't know. "It's not what I pictured," she said. "It's better." Then she looked at me, really looked at me. "Would you teach me? Real estate, I mean. I want to understand what you've built." I nodded toward the courtyard. "Come meet the folks who made this building home. That's where it starts." We walked slowly across the bricks together, stopping to greet tenants and listen to stories. Mom didn't talk much. She just watched, listened. And for the first time in a long, long time, she wasn't looking for flaws. She was looking for understanding. That night, there were no toasts, no speeches, no last-minute power plays, just neighbors sharing food and stories. Just my family sitting at tables they never thought they'd see, not because they had to, but because they finally wanted to. And I realized something as I stood there, drink in hand, lights reflecting in the glass windows of the building I had restored. Legacy doesn't start with big deals or breaking headlines. It starts in places like this, humble, worn, real. And for the first time they were seeing it. Not the suits, not the money, the meaning. And maybe, just maybe, they were ready to build something real too. The holiday party hummed with warmth, not from expensive decor or some curated vibe, but from something honest, something earned. Joel was up on a ladder, stringing lights across the archway with one of the tenants, Mr. Benner, a World War II vet who still insisted on shoveling the sidewalk when it rained. Jess knelt by a folding table, helping the Gonzalez kids frost cookies. Her boots were scuffed, her sweater was 2 seasons out of date, and she looked human. I stood near the back wall of the courtyard, coffee in one hand, my phone in the other. Notifications buzzed every few seconds. Press requests, meeting invites, offers. A venture fund wanted to partner. A local university wanted me to guest lecture. A big-shot investor offered to buy out my Cyprus portfolio. I locked the screen without answering a single one. Behind me, I heard Dad's voice. "You know," he said softly, "your great-grandfather, he always said buildings should shelter hearts, not just portfolios." I turned. He wasn't dressed like usual, no sweater draped over his shoulders, no cigar tucked behind his ear, just a jacket and jeans, like everyone else. "You could have ruined us," he said. I didn't argue. Instead, I looked around the courtyard, the lights, the laughter, the tenants telling stories over cider, Joel laughing with Mr. Benner, Jess covered in frosting, Mom pouring hot chocolate for Miss Eldridge like they'd known each other for years. "Never the goal," I said. "I just wanted to build something that outlasts me." He nodded slowly, eyes scanning the scene. "You did," he said. For a long while, we stood in silence, just watching. I thought about everything that had happened, the dinners, the jabs, the audit, the fallout. I thought about the titles they used to mock me with, the silence that used to follow when I walked into a room. And I thought about how none of that mattered now. The real victory wasn't proving them wrong. It was showing them what right looked like and watching them choose it in their own time. My phone buzzed again. I didn't look. Instead, I walked over to the cookie table and picked up a piping bag Jess had set down. I joined the kids, laughing as I tried and failed to draw a snowman on a gingerbread square. No one announced me. No one needed to. The man they used to overlook was now the one they looked to, not for money, not for favors, for guidance, for what came next. Because I didn't just win, I endured. And in the end, that was the quietest, strongest victory of all.